There is no good deal with Iran.
You're saying, Ruthie, that even a deal that
Yes.
actually shut down, dismantled,
Nope.
obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, you are...
That's like a deal with Hitler. I'm talking about the Iranian people. They were abandoned by Obama, and if Trump does the same, he will be no better than Obama. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit is coming up April 15th to 17th at the Waldorf Astoria in Jerusalem. It's shaping up to be a phenomenal few days, and we'd love for you to join us. Visit jns-summit.org to register and take a look at the speaker lineup. It's a top-level group. I'll be there as well. I hope to meet you in Jerusalem this April.
Shalom and welcome to another episode of Israel Undiplomatic. I'm Mark Regev here with my regular co-host, Ruthie Blum, and we've got a lot to discuss again. Of course, Iran. We've been discussing Iran a lot lately. What's new, Ruthie?
Well, as you and I have been discussing outside of the podcast, when there is something really critical in the news, like Iran and Gaza, of course, there's no getting around the fact that that is the main topic. And it certainly is the main topic that's preoccupying Israelis, other than really inside baseball, internal politics. And I think that today what we want to do is take a different angle. And that is that I believe whether or not everyone is trying to assess what is going on in President Trump's mind. And I think that's ridiculous. How can we know what goes on in anyone's mind? We only know from his behavior. I believe it was yesterday that President Trump answered reporters' questions. And here's what he had to say about Iran.
We have a tremendous force going there, just like we did in Venezuela, even bigger. And they'll be there soon, and I'd like to see a deal negotiated. I don't know that that's going to happen. Right now, we're talking to them. We're talking to Iran, and if we can work something out, that'd be great. And if we can't, probably bad things would happen.
Bad things will happen, probably. Okay, Mark, so what do you make of this statement of President Trump's?
Well, as you know, Ruthie, since retiring from the diplomatic corps, I've been teaching international relations at a university here in Israel. And what Trump is actually saying, there's a concept that is taught in international relations courses, and that is coercive diplomacy. That he's flexing muscles, he's moving military assets to the region, he's making threats, but he's also saying, I want a deal. And you Iranians, you need to agree to this deal or else. And he says, otherwise very bad things will happen. And I think that's very smart. It's been done over the years by all sorts of powers. The only question is, it's clear in my mind that he prefers a deal. The question is, can the Iranians, and we spoke about this over the last few weeks, is this crazy Ayatollah regime in Iran, which is so committed to its militant ideological worldview, yes? It's so stuck in the Khomeini revolution and exporting the Islamist revolution and so forth. Are they going to make the compromises that Trump can agree to get a deal? And I don't have an answer on that question because I don't know. If the regime doesn't want to be hit by America, if the regime believes that another war with America and maybe Israel, most likely, then the regime will lose power. And their only way to stay in power is to agree to Trump's terms, which could be very good, good terms, regarding the nuclear program, maybe regarding the ballistic missile program, maybe regarding their support for terrorist proxies across the region. In other words, that's where we are. Coercive diplomacy. Trump obviously prefers a deal. Will he succeed or not? The jury is still out.
Okay, so here's what I think. I think any deal will lead to bad things happening. First of all, you can't make a deal with the Ayatollahs. They will not honor any deal. And even if they do temporarily, first of all, they're already dicking around. They're saying, well, we'll talk about the nuclear program, but not the ballistic missiles and not proxy terrorism around the globe. That's off the table. They're already changing the venue of the so called negotiations that are supposed to take place on Friday that was supposed to be in Turkey, another evil regime. And they want to move it to Oman and have fewer participants. But here's the thing, there is no good deal with Iran. And Prime Minister Netanyahu said that to U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff in Jerusalem yesterday. He said, no deal with Iran. You can't trust them.
Can
But
I,
here's-
before you go into
Yes,
another point, and
yes,
let's
yes.
go on, I know what your next point is. I just want to raise this issue. When Netanyahu was arguing with the Obama administration about the JCPOA, right? Netanyahu and the Israeli government at the time said, we're not against any deal, we're against a bad deal. And that deal was classified as a bad deal because it allowed the Iranians to continue to enrich. They didn't have to dismantle their centrifuges. They only had to put them in cold storage, and they could take them out whenever they wanted. They could continue R&D, research on their nuclear program and so forth. But it was implied in all that if actually Iran did dismantle its military nuclear program, not just implied, I think it was said, if they really did it, that sort of deal would be acceptable to Israel, unlike the Obama deal, which was not, because it never didn't do what it said it was going to do. You're saying, Ruthie, that a deal that
Yes.
actually shut down, dismantled,
Nope.
obliterated the Iranian
Nope.
nuclear program, you are...
First of all, I remember when Netanyahu said that, I disagreed with Netanyahu saying that, well, if there's a good deal to be had, we'll have it. First of all, let's not call them the Iranians, let's call them the Islamic Republic. And I'm saying that in honor of the Iranians being gunned down in the streets. So let's say they're the Islamic Republic and the people are the Iranian people. No, first of all, it wasn't just that the JCPOA was a bad deal. It was. And Trump ripped it up. But what was bad was any deal with that. That's like a deal with Hitler. Okay, so I'm against any deal. I was very much in favor of the 12-day war. It was excellent. A combination of Israeli and U.S. force took out a significant portion of the nuclear facilities, not all of it, and certainly not all of the ballistic missile capabilities. And yes, sanctions are important. But at this moment in time, I want to talk about the moral imperative to help the Iranians topple their regime. They have been now for weeks taken to the streets, screaming death to Khomeini, asking for Trump's help and Netanyahu's help. And President Trump, more than 3 weeks ago now, I believe, he posted on Truth Social, he addressed the Iranian people. And he said, keep going, help is on the way. And as a result of that, and Prime Minister Netanyahu has already made video clips addressing the Iranian people, we're on your side, etc. And many thousands have been killed in Iran since President Trump's statement. Then he started backtracking. He said, well, they've stopped executing people, so we'll see. That wasn't true. They hadn't stopped executing people. And at this moment, I think that if Trump, after what he said and after what Netanyahu said, I believe there is a moral imperative to help those people. And the only way to really do it is through military force. Obviously, help them topple their regime. I didn't mean that we can, through military means, topple the regime. But that's what the Iranian people want. And now that Trump is just talking about nukes, ballistic missiles, and terrorism. Hey, what happened to the Iranian people? And we see this all over the world now, and we'll get to that. But this is crucial.
So, first of all, I want to distinguish between what Netanyahu said and what Trump said. Trump said, we support the people in the streets and help is on its way, clearly implying that America was about to intervene militarily. Okay, he didn't actually say that, but he said help is on its way is the strongest. Netanyahu, I thought, was more cautious in what he said. He said we support the Iranian people's struggle for freedom, yeah? And I mean, even the Europeans can say things like that, right? It's not saying we're going to come in there and topple the regime. It's not help is on its way. Though help on its way maybe can be interpreted different ways, though we know how it was received in Iran, right? I was listening when Trump made those comments. Your brother has John has a successful podcast out of New York, the Commentary magazine podcast. And he made a comparison that I liked. It appealed to my sense of historical comparisons. He said that it's like Eisenhower in 1956 in Hungary. Like the Americans were calling then, it was the beginning of the Cold War, 1956. It's only 11 years at the end of the Second World War. All of Eastern Europe has been taken over by the Soviets, yes. They've imposed communist regimes on all the countries of Eastern Europe, including Hungary. And America, through its broadcasting, they had Radio Free Europe and other networks and so forth. They were calling on the people of Eastern Europe to throw off their Soviet occupiers and attain their freedom. And Hungarian people actually did that in 1956. There was the famous revolution against Soviet control and the terrible communist regime that they had in Hungary. And then the Russians, of course, sent in the tanks, and it was brutally repressed. And America, though expressing moral outrage, didn't lift a finger to help the people of Hungary. Because I think the bottom line for Eisenhower was, of course, we want the people of Hungary to be free. But the Soviet Union had nuclear weapons, and they said, are we going to risk a third world war, possibly a nuclear war, with all that entails for the people of Hungary? And there's a similarity with Iran here. Trump, I think Eisenhower also said that the Eastern Europe, that's part of, the Russian sphere of influence, right or wrongly, and what happens inside their influence, that's not going to, if they try to expand their sphere of influence, we're going to stop them. Containment. But containment also means what's already yours, you get to keep for the time being. We're not going to actively try to, and so it was also part of, I think, of superpower realpolitik, so to speak. And I think Eisenhower made the right decision. And I would say now, the Iranian people deserve freedom. The Iranian people deserve a better regime. A new regime in Iran would be better, not only for the people of Iran, but a different sort of regime in Iran would be better for all of Iran's neighbors. It'd be better for the Arabs. It'd be better for Israel. It would be better for the world. But do you go to war for that if you can get a deal diplomatically? And it's an if. I don't have an answer. I don't know if the Iranian regime will agree to it. But if you can get a deal that actually does close down Iran's nuclear program and changes their aggressive behavior, is that not in the Eisenhower tradition of using your strength in a very smart way?
First of all, Eisenhower is not an example I would like to emulate, number one. Number two, today we saw, after all this talk about you don't want to cause nuclear war in Iran, and Iran could wipe out Israel, we saw in the course of the last 2 years, and especially in the 12-day war, that wasn't the case, that Iran was a lot weaker, that the Islamic Republic, was a lot weaker than we had thought, and that the West and United States and Israel are a lot stronger in the face of that threat, number one. Number two, no, if there's a deal to be had, it will be bad by its very nature. Making a deal with the Islamic Republic is bad. So there is no deal, they say. And would you rather have that than military action? No, absolutely not. Now, one encouraging sign is that when President Trump said help is on the way, and he's sort of stopped, and he's been changing his rhetoric. However, he has sent aircraft carriers to the Middle East. He keeps saying, we're preparing, we're ready. Prime Minister Netanyahu says we're ready for any scenario. However, what I don't like about what Netanyahu has said, he's announced, he's warned the Islamic Republic. If you dare attack us, you'll be sorry. In other words, you'll be sorry because we will unleash something you've never seen before, something like that. Those aren't his exact words. And it bothered me. You know why it bothered me? Because I didn't like that he said, if you attack us, we will retaliate. I think, if anything, that the October 7th war taught us and all the proxies in the region, what we have learned is that it is not good for us to be sitting ducks waiting to be killed and then have legitimacy to retaliate. We know what Iran's plan is. It is regional, global hegemony. It is wiping the Jewish state off the map. It is engaging proxies to do that, just that. And therefore, no, I do not think a deal is better than military action.
So I want to say the following. We had a very successful 12-day war, and the Iranian regime was exposed as being much weaker than they presented themselves, right? I mean, the truth is Israeli pilots were flying over Tehran, their capital city, and there was no anti-aircraft fire at all. We didn't lose a single plane in all those 12 days of fighting, right? Neither did the Americans, though they were in a more limited way. We were there almost every day for 12 days, and we didn't lose a single pilot. We had freedom of the skies over Iran. And if there is to be a war, and I think it's quite possible because I'm not sure the Iranians will agree to the deal that Trump's going to put on the table. But even if there is a war, I'm also confident that we will be hurt much less than we were in the 12-day war. Because, first of all, Iran's capabilities have been substantially depleted. We've learned important lessons from that war, right? And unlike the previous round of fighting, where Israel stood alone, yes, for the first 10 days of the war until America came in and hit the nuclear targets, very important that they did that. Midnight Hammer, very, very crucial. They did things that we couldn't have done maybe by ourselves, right? So we thank the Americans for doing that. But if the Americans are involved from day one, that means the Iranians, their ability to hurt us will be even more difficult because they'll be facing a U.S. onslaught. But here I want to say something where I do disagree with you. I'm not against Israeli preemption. The 12-day war was started by Israel to deal with the Iranian nuclear program and their ballistic missile program. We took out, the Saddam's nuclear reactor in 1981, and we took out the Syrian nuclear reactor. When was that? That was in 2007. And so I'm not against Israeli preemption. I think in the current, and I have no illusions about the Iranian regime and their hostile and aggressive designs towards Israel, and they want to wipe us off the map. I understand all that. But in the current situation, where the U.S. is making these threats and negotiating coercive diplomacy with the Iranians, right? I think now Israel has to say this is now an American-led show, and I think we can't preempt in the current circumstances. If they attack us, as Netanyahu said, we can go all out, and I think America will go all out too, because they'll be breaking. But I think Israel, we're right to send a message to say to the Iranian regime very clearly, you attack us and we're going to hit you back hard. But the idea that in the current circumstances, where it's very clear it's all a Tehran-Washington battle, and we're on the American side, I think it would be wrong for Israel to preempt at this stage. If the Americans want to go, we're all there with them, right? But I think it would be wrong for U.S.-Israel relations, for Israel today under these specific circumstances that we see, for Israel to preempt.
No, I think that's an excellent point. So basically, though, I do believe, though, that the U.S. should preempt because, again, we should really pray. You said, well, we don't know if the Islamic Republic is going to make a deal. We better hope they don't, because if they do, it will be a lie. It won't be worth the ink on the paper it's written on. They might tactically decide to wait until Trump's term runs out and in the meantime build up all their terrorist proxies and their weapons, etc., as we see Hamas doing in Gaza and everywhere else. So yes, I take it that Israel shouldn't just now attack, and it is possible that we've heard of a bunch of explosions going on in Iran and fires. The regime says that they're gas leaks or something. Israel and the United States deny being behind them, but it's very possible that that's not true, that Israel is behind it, and that's its way of participating, not by preempting a flyover strike, but rather, disrupting disrupting and also disrupting the regime's infrastructure. But what I will say is, I think really now I want to talk about the question of morals. Now,
Can I just before we
Yes.
go to morals, and morals
Yeah.
are important, but I want to raise one issue.
yes,
When we talk about the sort of deal that might be on the table, okay? And here, if America goes for a deal, I think Israel has to say very public and loudly, like we did after the bad deal of the JCPOA. But even if this is a good deal, we have to say that the deal doesn't bind Israel, that if we think our security is threatened, we will act. I think that's a very important thing as a sovereign country, right? I think we need to say that. And what is my fear, even if it's a very good deal, because the Iranian, and once again, I think the probability is it's not for sure at all. I'm not sure the Iranian regime, because it's such an extreme and crazy regime, they could actually, give Trump an alternative that he has to attack, even though that's not his preference, yes? But even if you hypothetically got a very good deal, right? They could say, we're butting the bullet for 3 years. Trump leaves the White House. Who's going to come afterwards, right? And the person who comes afterwards might not be, might be more of an isolationist, or might be more of a pacifist. And if there's,
or a Democrat, heaven forbid.
you could also have a Republican isolationist or pacifist.
Oh, definitely,
All right?
definitely.
And the Iranians are crazy, but they're very smart. And so they could say, break the deal in small incremental steps, right? And so there wouldn't be necessarily an outright provocation. That'd be my fear, even in the case of a good deal, okay? But I think that if the White House agrees to a deal with the Iranians that on the face of it gives you what you need on the nuclear deal and on the other issues, it's very difficult for Israel to come out and to overturn the table, so to speak. I hope that Trump will, he was very critical of Obama's bad deal. He won't want to be compared to Obama, and he will only agree. This is my hope. I have no guarantee, but this is my hope, that he will only agree to a deal that is genuinely a good deal.
Again, that's not the only thing he doesn't want to be compared to Obama for. In 2009, when the Iranians took to the streets over a stolen election, Obama abandoned them, and Hillary Clinton said, yes, we're observing. Yes, we'd like to see the Iranian people. They have to decide for themselves. That's more important than, I'm not even talking about the JCPOA. I'm talking about the Iranian people. They were abandoned by Obama. And if Trump does the same, he will be no better than Obama. And I don't think he's going to allow himself to go down in history as no better than Obama. And one second, I want to add, there was an Iranian drone that attacked the USS Abraham Lincoln.
Attack. It was
approaching it.
Correct.
And there was another. There was another aggression against U.S. ships in the Strait of Hormuz, and those two things happened a few minutes after or around the time that Steve Witkoff was in Prime Minister Netanyahu's office in Jerusalem discussing this and Gaza. Now, that should have been enough, while Trump is saying, well, the Iranians are saying they're going to make a deal, and there was aggression in this naval aggression against the United States. That should have been sufficient. So the question now is Trump playing a game where he's still waiting for the U.S. military and the Israeli military to give the go-ahead? Because one thing we do know, we've heard it from really reliable sources, that there is a shortage or a problem with, in the U.S. and Israel, interceptors. And it is not that all of this is stalling tactic. But I'll tell you one thing. Honestly, it's not just the deal. You keep saying, if he can make a deal, he should. No, he should not. And if he abandons the Iranian people the way Obama did, then I will be the first person to go after him for that. I don't think he's going to do that, and I hope he's not going to do it. So far, he has been stellar in the region, other than there is a few things that I really don't like. But in this case, I'm almost certain he's not going to do that. He's not going to allow himself to be humiliated that way.
I want to correct something you said. I said he should go for the deal. I never said he should. I said he will. In other words, I wasn't making a moral statement
Uh,
or an ethical statement. I was saying that if I know Trump, he'll go for a deal if he can get a good deal. That's what I was saying. I didn't say he should. Never said he should. I agree with you that Trump does not want to be known as the anti-Obama.
no, as the Obama.
As the Obama, as the person, he's built himself as the anti-Obama, right? I'm the guy that was willing to use force. I'm America first. I stand up for American power. I'm not afraid to use force when I need to, right? But he's also in parallel, and we've said this before on our podcast, he's also not George W. Bush. He's against nation building. He's against all-out war. He likes his wars to be short and sweet, like they were in the Midnight Hammer, like it was in Venezuela. He doesn't want boots on the ground. He's been very critical of U.S. wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, very critical of his Republican predecessor in that way, and so forth. And so I think the Trump legacy is somewhere that it's not Obama, but it's also not George W. And I think that's the interesting thing to watch. But I've been running away from the ethical side. You want to have a moral discussion
Yes.
about our obligation to the Iranian people and their struggle for democracy.
No. Stop a second. I do not want to use the word democracy or nation building or anything else. I'm talking about mass murder being carried out by Islamists, okay? And that has to a stop has to be put to that, and especially since President Trump promised to help the people. I didn't talk about democracy. I have no idea, but I'll tell you what Trump has in common with all previous U.S. presidents, and it's a Western illness altogether, or you could say it's healthy that the West doesn't think this way, but it's really getting out of hand, and that is misunderstanding the power of religious ideology, especially Islamist religious ideology, and the idea, and this is relevant to Gaza and relevant to Witkoff and Kushner, the idea that really all people just want, and that's why George W. Bush, you mentioned him, it was from a good place. All people just want to live in freedom and have free elections and have democracy. It is a total misreading of Islamic culture, of the Middle East, certainly as it is and as it has been forever, and the idea that somehow all you need is to give people affluence and a reason for all this hope and change. That's very Western. That's not the Middle Eastern mentality. And it's not really even Trump's fault. I don't think he knows about this stuff. And a lot of these, and the people talking to him and whispering in his ear don't know enough about it, nor did any of his predecessors, Democrats, Republicans. I think the difference is that the Democrats, when the Democratic Party moved really far, far to the left, it began almost to identify with radical Islamists. There was this kind of marriage, like communist Islamist alliance. The Republicans, it comes from a different place. That comes from also isolationism, traditional in the Republican Party. It used to be very isolationist, but also, this America first. There is a battle over what that means. And as I say, I believe that America, if it has anything, any light to shine on the world, and Israel, we say we're a beacon in the Middle East. It's not that we force democracy on anybody. It's that we see mass murder taking place. If we are being mass murdered as we were on October 7th or in the Holocaust, there is a moral imperative to stand together to fight that.
So first of all, I want to disagree with something you said when you talked about in the Middle East. Okay. And you're correct, and I believe it to be true. You just can't come to a country which has got no democratic traditions and no traditions of independent civil society and say, we're going to have democracy tomorrow and have elections. And it doesn't work. It's a process, right? It's a process. I think if the Mullah regime in Iran was going to fall, and does fall, I think Iran in many ways is uniquely positioned in the Middle East to make something more successful. And let me articulate why. It's because the Iranian people are educated, The Iranian people are a very successful people as a country, right? And they have been under this terrible Islamist regime, what is it, since 1979, right? We're getting close to 50 years. And the people hate the regime. We know that. And so it's not like one warlord taking over another warlord in a place like Somalia or the Libyan civil war where you never had any civil society, right, and so forth. In Iran, there is potential for something good. Will it automatically be a Western democracy straight away? I don't know. But I think the Iranian people do deserve better, and I think they have the ability to do better. And once again, here I think the Americans have been very clear. It's ultimately, and Netanyahu has said this as well in Israel, a regime change is the job of the Iranian people. They have to do it. You raise a different issue about stopping massacres, okay? And here, I think the Iranian regime, from its perspective, has been very clever. Because it's no doubt there were huge massacres around between the 7th and the 9th of January, right? And they really they massacred people, and there are different numbers out there, and you don't know which numbers to believe, but it's clear that thousands, if not tens of thousands of Iranians were murdered in those protests by the regime, by the regime's thugs, and so forth. But it also appears that all the videos that we've been seeing lately are videos predominantly that came out from that period that couldn't come out during that period because of the internet blackout. And the question is, what is the situation today in Iran? And it's my understanding that because of their backlash by the regime against the protests, that everyone knows people who are killed, everyone knows someone, that actually it is quiet in Iran today. So if the killing has stopped because of the atrocities committed by the regime has brought about this quiet, maybe only temporarily, can you say we're going in now to save innocent people?
Absolutely, because if it has slowed down, and we don't know for certain, because as you point out, there are conflicting reports, although all reports say that they're being killed, even in hospitals, wounded people. There are Revolutionary Guards going up and shooting wounded people in the hospitals. We heard reports from doctors claiming that. So we don't know exactly, but absolutely, because if it has quieted down at all, it's because of fear. Because anybody left at home, imagine you have you have teenagers at home, you say to them, you're not going out to the street, you'll be killed. So if it's quieted down, that's the only reason. And no, yes.
I said that.
Yeah, no, but what I mean is you said, and so would this be the time to attack? Yes. The regime has made it very clear what its intentions are. That it occasionally says one thing and says something else out of the other. We know what its intentions are. It never hid it. Let me tell you, you made a point that the Iranian people are special, that they are actually very educated, they're very cultured. That's absolutely true. Interestingly, they had a tradition of Zoroastrianism more than Islam. And I'd like to point out that many of them will say to you, we're different because we're not Arabs. I know I'm not allowed to say that because that sounds racist. No, but they often make a point.
And you see the Iranian diaspora, it's a very successful diaspora.
And the Iranians say, don't lump us in with Arabs. We're not Arabs. We have a different culture. And that is actually true, whether you think Arab culture is good or not. And again, it's not all uniform, of course.
No.
But I do believe the way I believe that the U.S. had a moral imperative to liberate the concentration camps, a moral imperative to fight evil. And that isn't, as I said, it's not a question of regime change, not regime change. I'm not talking about democracy or rebuilding. First of all, Iran wasn't exactly a Western democracy beforehand. The Shah of Iran, he wasn't elected. But ironically, there was backlash against the Shah because he, first of all, he created the most frightening prisons. The Evin prison was under the Shah. The Shah also loved luxury, and he spent a lot of money on himself and his palace, while the Iranian people resented that. But He loved Hollywood. He loved America. He liked Israel. He was on the verge of gradual reforms. And that's when the radicals slipped into the cracks. So again, I don't know what'll happen afterwards, but I can tell you one thing. This idea that you have to be careful because when one regime is toppled, you never know what will come after. That's true. Worse than what is going on in Iran since 1979, there won't be something worse. That's for sure.
I agree with you on that. I think that whatever would come after the Islamic regime would be better. Better for the people of Iran, better for the neighborhood, better for the world. That I'm not arguing. I don't think it can get worse than the current regime. Right? That I accept. The question, though, that's a theoretical question. The real question facing us today is what should America do? Okay, and that the jury is out. And I don't know, will we have an answer by the time we meet next week to discuss this?
Well, I certainly hope we will, but we say that every week, and so far it has not materialized.
And which also says something about Trump, because sometimes Trump is portrayed in Western media and in American media as being this cowboy who's shooting from the hip, but it's, and it actually, obviously there's the bluster, but is he not, maybe I'll just say this to finish our weekly podcast. He seems to me in many ways, I mean, he's got that sort of theatrical side to him as well, but is there not a method to the madness? Is he not actually a very shrewd international player? And with that, I say farewell until next week, Ruthie.
Looking forward to it.